Their territory stretched across 40 star systems, and they guarded their borders with weapons that could tear apart warships in seconds. The Galactic Council had labeled them as permanently hostile. They recommended complete avoidance. Most species listened to this advice. Did not listen. She was 42 years old when she first requested assignment to the border station. The United Earth Diplomatic Corps rejected her application immediately. They told her it was a death sentence. She applied again the next month. They rejected her again. She applied 14 more times over 2 years before they finally agreed, mostly because no one else wanted the position. The border station was a small metal box floating in empty space. It sat exactly 1 light-year from territory. Arrived alone with supplies for 5 years and communication equipment that they had never responded to in 3 centuries of attempts. Her superiors expected her to sit quietly, file reports about nothing, and eventually request transfer like everyone else who had taken this assignment. Had different plans. On her first day, she began transmitting. She sent a simple message in every language humans had ever encountered. She introduced herself. She explained that she meant no harm. She said she would wait for as long as necessary. The did not respond, had expected this. She transmitted the same message again the next day, and the next, and the next. 6 months passed without any response. Continued transmitting. She began adding details to her messages. She talked about Earth. She described human history. She explained their mistakes and their achievements. She spoke about wars and peace treaties. She discussed art and music and literature. They remained silent but noticed something interesting. Their patrol ships, which usually destroyed anything that transmitted signals toward their space, had stopped firing at her station. They simply watched from a distance. Took this as progress. The first response came after 18 months. It was not friendly. A ship approached her station and broadcast a single word in broken human language. The word was leave. Responded by thanking them for communicating. She said she was honored to hear from them. She asked if they would like to talk more. The ship fired a warning shot that missed her station by several kilometers. Then it departed. Recorded this encounter as a major success in her report to Earth. Her superiors thought she had lost her mind. She continued transmitting. She began learning the language from the fragments of intercepted communications that other species had collected over centuries. The language was incredibly complex. It had 12 tenses for describing the past and none for the future. Found this fascinating. She spent 3 years mastering the basics. When she felt confident enough, she began transmitting in. The response was immediate. A fleet of warships surrounded her station within hours, remained calm. She repeated her message of peace in their language. She apologized for any errors in her pronunciation. She asked for correction. The fleet commander, unnamed, contacted her directly. He demanded to know how she had learned their sacred tongue, explained that she had studied very hard because she wanted to understand them, was confused by this answer. No other species had ever bothered to learn. He departed without destroying her station, which considered remarkable progress. Years passed. His hair turned gray. Her body aged in the small station, but her determination never weakened. She transmitted every single day without exception. She learned more of the language. She began to understand their culture through the small details they accidentally revealed in their angry responses. They were not naturally violent, she realized. They were afraid. Something had happened in their history that made them trust no one outside their own species. Began researching this mystery. She spent 7 years piecing together fragments of information from ancient records, intercepted signals, and the rare responses they gave her. She discovered something that changed everything. 8,000 years ago, they had been a peaceful species. They had welcomed visitors from other worlds. Those visitors had betrayed them. An alliance of 3 species had pretended friendship while secretly planning invasion. They had learned technology, mapped their defenses, and then attacked without warning. The war had lasted 2 centuries. They had survived, but they had lost half their population and all their trust in other species. Understood now, They were not evil, they were wounded. She changed her approach. Instead of simply asking for friendship, she began acknowledging their pain. She spoke about the betrayal in her transmissions. She expressed sorrow for what had happened to them. She admitted that trust was difficult and that she understood why they feared outsiders. She promised nothing except her continued presence and her willingness to wait. Commander responded again after had been at the station for 12 years. He asked why she was still there. She told him that she believed they deserved to know that not all species were like those who had betrayed them. Asked how long she intended to stay. Said she would stay for the rest of her life if necessary. Did not respond for 2 more years. When he finally contacted her again, he asked a simple question. He wanted to know what humans wanted from them. Gave him an honest answer. She said humans wanted nothing except the possibility of friendship. She explained that Earth had sent her alone specifically because they wanted to prove they had no military intentions. One old woman in a tiny station was not a threat to anyone. The conversation that followed lasted 6 hours. Asked about human history, told him about their wars and their peace. She explained how humans had nearly destroyed themselves multiple times before learning to cooperate. She described the long process of building trust between nations that had been enemies for centuries. She admitted that humans were not perfect. They made mistakes, but they also learned from those mistakes. Ended the conversation without any promises. Continued waiting. She was 63 years old when they invited her to there. The invitation was unprecedented. No outsider had been allowed in space since the ancient betrayal. Accepted immediately. She traveled alone in a small shuttle that they provided. The journey took 3 weeks. She used the time to continue learning their language and customs. It was beautiful. Blue forests covered the continents. Silver oceans reflected the light of twin suns. Was greeted by who had risen to become a senior leader in their government. He explained that the High Council had been watching her for 21 years. They had listened to every transmission. They had studied every word she spoke. They had waited for deception, for hidden agendas, for the betrayal they expected from all outsiders. They had found none. Met with the High Council for 10 days. She answered thousands of questions. She spoke about humanity with complete honesty. She admitted human flaws and failures. She did not pretend that humans were perfect beings. She simply asked for the chance to prove that trust was possible. The council debated for 3 months after she left, returned to her station and continued transmitting as she had done for over 2 decades. She was 64 years old now. Her health was declining. The doctors on Earth wanted her to come home, but she refused. She had not finished her work. The answer came on a quiet morning, appeared on her communication screen with news that made her cry for the first time in 40 years. The Federation had voted to establish diplomatic relations with humanity. They would begin with small steps, trade agreements, cultural exchanges, perhaps, eventually, friendship. Spent 3 more years at the border station, helping to establish the first formal connections between humans and she trained young diplomats who would continue her work. She wrote detailed guides about culture and psychology. She refused all offers of medals or honors from Earth. She said she had not done anything remarkable. She had simply refused to give up. They saw things differently. They built a statue of on there. It stood in the center of their capital city, carved from the silver stone of their sacred mountains. The inscription was written in both and human languages. It said, "She waited when others would not. She understood when others could not. She believed when no one else did." Died at age 71, still at her station, still transmitting messages of peace. Her final transmission was simple. She thanked the forgiving humanity a chance. She expressed hope that future generations would build on the foundation she had started. She said goodbye in perfect, using all 12 tenses for the past to honor everything they had shared. They mourned her as one of their own. For the first time in 8,000 years, they opened their borders completely. Ships from Earth were welcomed as friends. The ancient wound began to heal at last. Other species in the galactic community were amazed. They asked how humans had accomplished what everyone else had failed to do. The answer was always the same. Humans had sent a single diplomat who refused to accept failure. She had transmitted messages for 24 years without giving up. She had learned a language that others considered impossible. She had acknowledged pain instead of ignoring it. She had offered honesty instead of manipulation. She had simply persisted when everyone else had quit. They eventually became humanity's strongest allies. They shared technology that advanced human civilization by centuries. They defended human colonies against hostile species. They named their children after. They taught their young ones about the small woman who had sat alone in space for decades, believing in friendship when no one else did. Humans spread across the galaxy with the beside them. Together they formed alliances with dozens of other species. The diplomatic methods that had pioneered became standard training for all human ambassadors. Her patience, her honesty, her willingness to wait. The other species began to understand something important about humans. They were not the strongest species in the galaxy. They were not the most advanced, but they had a quality that no other species possessed in such abundance. They simply refused to stop trying. They called this quality in honor of. It became a word used across the galaxy. When something seemed impossible, when all hope appeared lost, when everyone else had abandoned the effort, someone would always say the same thing. We need more. And somehow, somewhere, a human would step forward to provide it.